Okay, so this is the ReReadables, a video series where I'm going to be breaking down some of the most iconic rereadable books in fiction and modern nonfiction. Of course, I did borrow this idea from the Podfather Bill Simmons, The Ringer, their rewatchable series where they break down iconic movies that are rewatchable, that they sometimes would catch on cable, or that they cannot turn away from when they're flipping through the channels. Now, books are a little bit different. People don't always reread books. I know that I'm not a huge rereader, but I wanted to reapproach some iconic texts from my life, from I think a lot of modern readers' lives, and talk about whether they actually are rereadable. I'm going to be borrowing a lot of the categories from the rewatchables. I'm going to be introducing some categories of my own as we go through this. I want to work with you guys. If you guys have any ideas for rereadable categories, I'm open to them. I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys think of it. In this first video, I'm going to be breaking down Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the second book in the iconic fiction series. It's a book that I read when I was a kid. I recently reread it, and does it hold up? I want to answer that question. I want to give out awards. I want to go through the whole process of what makes it rereadable. And at the end, I want to give a score to tell you on a scale of 1 to 10, where does this book fall as a rereadable text? So I'm going to start out all these videos with something of a brief plot summary. So Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets follows Harry Potter in his second year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Now you may be wondering why I didn't start the series with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Frankly, I don't like that book that much. When I do reapproach some of these books, I typically think about skipping that one because I just think it's very childish as compared to a lot of the later books in the series. And for me, this was the book that really kind of captured the world of Harry Potter and really pulled me in a lot more so than that first book. So I always skip Sorcerer's Stone, Philosopher's Stone, whatever you want to call it, and I jump right into Chamber of Secrets because it is an iconic text. It is one of the best-selling books of the last 100 years, and for good reason. So Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets is another magical mystery novel that follows Harry Potter and his friends Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger as they solve a series of crimes that are being committed throughout the school against their fellow students. There is magic involved. Obviously, the Dark Lord Voldemort himself, who is constantly in opposition to Harry Potter, is also involved in this sort of nefarious scheme as Harry and his friends investigate the heir of Salazar Slytherin, one of the founders of the four houses of Harry Potter. The book was published in 1998. It was a massive hit at the time because it's one thing to publish a book like Harry Potter that kind of captures some people's imaginations, but this book kind of takes it to the next level. It expands the world, and more importantly to me, it makes the series a lot darker. It makes it it gives it an inkling of this more adult world that is not quite all sunshine and magical rainbows the same way the first book is. This book really sort of shows you what Harry Potter could be and what it could ultimately grow into. Now, did we know that the Harry Potter books would eventually have like one of the higher body counts in any sort of child's fiction ever written? No, probably not. But these books really do give you a hint of how dark J.K. Rowling was willing to go. Now, of course, I'd be remiss not to mention this in discussing this book and sort of the big picture elements of it, that unfortunately J.K. Rowling has gone off the reservation in terms of what she occupies her time with. I don't want to get mired down in what some of the horrible sort of things that these authors often devote their lives to after making a lot of money. I don't want to talk about it much past then. Before I get into the categories, I want to talk about when I probably first read this book. I'm going to always try to talk about that because I think it's important when you're talking about one of these rereadable texts. Sometimes books catch you at the right time, and sometimes that's when you're a young person. And a lot of times, obviously, I'm 31 years old, going to be 32, and this book hit me at the perfect moment where I was, I think, 8 years old when I read this. Now, when Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets was first introduced to me, I listened to the Jim Dale audiobook. I remember this, it was on cassette. My mother got them for me because it was kind of a hot gift at the time. I was first starting to kind of read at that time, so I wasn't really someone who was reading chapter books yet, at least at that scale. So it was a great introduction to the series because those Jim Dale audiobooks, they're still available now. They are incredible. I re-listened to a bunch of them over the pandemic, and they still really hit. I did eventually go back and reread this book later on in school, but I think it's important to sort of preface this that I was 8 years old when I first read this book. I don't think I appreciated a lot of the subtext here. I don't think I appreciated a lot of what was going on, but it still grasped me. It still grabbed me because the story itself is just so gripping and there is so much to sort of unpack here. Okay, so let's get to some of the awards here. I'm going to borrow a lot of the awards directly from the rewatchables, and I'm going to apply them to our world of reading. They're not typically always going to be a one-to-one, but one that I think really translates is the most rereadable scene. That is the scene that is especially fun to watch again, or read again, or just experience again, and one that sticks out to you when you think about this book. I'm going to go with two top contenders here. The first is going to be the Harry Potter and Ron car chase, where they steal Ron Weasley's parents' car, a magical flying car, and fly it to Hogwarts, ultimately to be attacked by a Whomping Willow tree that smashes the car to bits. An iconic scene from the movies. You've definitely seen it if you've seen the films, and it's one of these scenes that really just captures the magical world of Harry Potter. That's probably going to be most people's sort of answer, I would think. For me, personally, there are two scenes that sort of stand above that one in terms of most rereadable. One being Ron receiving the Howler letter, another scene that's captured very well within the films, but it's after he returns to Hogwarts, his mother finds out that he's almost expelled, and he receives this letter that is what's called a Howler, where it sort of records her voice, and she is essentially roasting and screaming at him in front of the entire hall. Very funny scene to reread and to live through again, because it just has a lot of chaotic energy that I find unique to a story like this. It's ostensibly written for kids. And finally, to me, my number one most rereadable scene is going to be the reveal of Tom Riddle. I should have said at the top of this, but this video is going to have spoilers, obviously, because that is just the nature of what we're talking about here. We're going to break down the book itself. We're going to talk about whether it is rereadable. So I had to make that sort of clarification before I dove into what I believe to be the most rereadable scene in the entire book. And that is the final reveal in the Chamber of Secrets, where Tom Riddle is revealed to be Lord Voldemort, iconic enemy of Harry Potter, the guy who killed his parents as a youthful person, as a youth who Harry's been writing in a diary to for some period of time, who Ron Weasley's sister has been having this sort of diary relationship. Very strange sort of dynamic, but the reveal of Tom Riddle and / Voldemort essentially putting his soul into this book, this diary that he wrote years and years ago, and allowing himself to attempt to come back to life by virtue of this diary is just a compelling story. It really works for me. And the reveal itself, I remember just thinking how crazy it was as a kid, like that reveal. I didn't see it coming whatsoever. And when he spells out his name, and he reworks the letters and puts them into place, and he reveals Tom Riddle turns into Lord Voldemort. It's just a great moment. Just really hits even now, all these years later. Next award. Best quote. Now, this is pretty self-explanatory. It's a standout line from the books. I think we have a couple of options here. First option here is from Albus Dumbledore. It's sort of a saccharine line, but it's not our abilities that show us who we are, it's our choices. Okay, very nice. Good, powerful lesson to be had there. But that's not going to be my pick for best quote. My best quote of this entire book is going to be when Ron is talking about what happened with the Whomping Willow, and I believe Snape is trying to say that they destroyed a protected species of Whomping Willow tree, the tree that is punching their car, and Ron is asked, I think the tree did more damage to us than we did to it. Just a very funny line from this 11-year-old. Does not quite carry the heft of Dumbledore's line, but I do think it is a pretty funny joke for an 11-year-old kid, especially in that moment, because it is so earnest, it is so genuine. So obviously we have two contenders there. I'd love to hear what other people's favorite quotes from this book are. There are so many great sort of gleaming lines of dialogue in this book. I think it stands out in that regard as well. The dialogue is really well written for a kid's book, especially at the time. Moving on, let's talk about what's aged the best from these books. This is elements of the story that have held up really well over time. Now, obviously there's going to be stuff that has not held up well over time, but this book has some pieces that I think really do hold up. First off, just how this book, as ostensibly a piece of children's fiction, introduces young readers to a lot of darker ideas, a lot of sort of more complex, morally gray issues. There's some incredible world building at play here. We have literal wizard Nazis, some real classism between the Malfoys and the Weasleys. We also sort of introduce young readers here to this idea that people are just hateful. There are people who are hateful of other people based purely upon their backgrounds, but with a lot of what we're dealing with Malfoy and Hermione and this idea of what they call mudbloods and the disdain with which the pure-blooded members of the wizarding community often treat some of the muggle-born members of the community. These are kind of complex things. It's very strange that the creator of the series would one day go on to I guess, embody a lot of the hateful elements that the worst characters in this book are doing. But that irony is not lost upon me. Nonetheless, it doesn't take away from how well that is sort of executed here, especially as a book that is, again, for young readers. It's meant to introduce a lot of these ideas, and I think it does a great job of doing that. Second thing, sort of speaking off of that, this pervasive idea of unspoken prejudice that is so relevant throughout this second book in particular. This idea of prejudice within the wizarding world is not there in the first book. It's not an element of it. That first book is really more about introducing you to this magical world, and anything can be possible there. So then to incorporate this into the second book, I mean, it's aged well, especially in a time where this unspoken idea of prejudice has never been more relevant across the world. Next up, the takedown of celebrity culture by way of Gilderoy Lockhart and what a bumbling fool he is once you reveal what his actual knowledge base is. I think that's aged particularly well, especially in a world where influencers are now abound. There are plenty of people, I think, who we would love to see parodied or satirized in this way now, and who it would still be applicable to. So Lockhart revealing himself to be this sort of treacherous, cowardly fool who is putting on this front and pretending to be something he's not is, again, something that I think is aged really well in the age of celebrity that we currently live in. Finally, the thing that I think is aged the best of this book is the idea that young people could be radicalized, not by necessarily speaking to people online, but by speaking to strangers just in a diary in this case. So Ginny Weasley is, I guess, pouring her heart out to strangers who she doesn't know by writing in this diary to Tom Riddle, again, somebody we don't know. It's just a magical diary. But Tom Riddle is essentially working to radicalize her and to use her for nefarious means. A lot of that going around. A lot of that going around in this country, in the world. Young people being radicalized by strangers online and sort of nefarious forces using the anonymity of the online world to bring young people into their coalition, if you will. So I think that in particular has aged super well, how they handle it with Ginny. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. You know, it's a whole book about bad actors trying to radicalize young people through an online forum-like text. Okay, next up, what has aged the worst? Now, this is going to be something that feels dated or problematic now in the year 2026 when looking at the Harry Potter books. First off, the Weasley family dynamic makes no sense to me. Why can't Mrs. Weasley work? I guess that's my top question. There's like an element of sort of internal misogyny in this world here, because Mrs. Weasley doesn't work, but her kids are at boarding school for 10 months out of the year. They're never home. These kids stay there for Christmas. They don't even come home for the holidays. So what is she doing during that period of time? I understand that they work on like kind of a homestead, but the family never has any money. That's a recurring theme of this. Why can't Mrs. Weasley, you know, get a job, pick up some extra shifts at one of the magical bakeries? I don't know, do something, contribute to the household income. Arthur is like that kind of old-fashioned, doesn't want his wife working. I don't know, Arthur, get a different job then, dude. You're working in public service. Think about this. I think that has aged poorly in the time now, especially, you know, it's expensive, this world we live in. Inflation would have hit the Weasleys like a Mack truck. Another part of this aged poorly. Why do the Weasleys keep having children? They don't have any money. And I know that that's sort of an old-fashioned idea, but like it's a recurring thing throughout this that the Weasleys are struggling. They do, everything is really cut off. But these guys just keep cranking through children. They have Percy, they have Bill, they have Fred, they have George, they have Ron, they have Ginny. It's 6 kids. I may be missing one. If I am, you know, be sure to tell me. But whatever the case may be, they keep cranking through kids, and they can't afford it. And I mean, Lord knows, Mr. Weasley, he won't let his wife work, I guess. I mean, some of the economic stuff doesn't make sense to me. The whole Weasley dynamic is a little bit questionable to me. And I think especially in today's modern economy, very difficult to not look at them a little bit side-eyed, like what's going on there? What's happening? Why do you guys keep cranking through kids and not letting your wife work? Okay, heat check. So this is the Dion Waiters Award. Dion Waiters was a NBA player who would frequently overestimate his abilities and would sometimes shoot a shot that was horrendous to look at, but it was a bit what we would call a heat check to see if he is actually hot in that moment on a basketball court. Heat check moments they occur in film, they occur in books. Sometimes it's the writer doing it, sometimes it's the character doing it. In this book, we're going to call it, I think, both here. This is both a writer and a character heat check. And the Dion Waiters Heat Check Award for this book is the Dobby. Goes to Dobby. Dobby hands down. Dobby, the house elf, is unfathomably annoying upon reread. When you reapproach this book, the guy is a pain. All he does is negative things to Harry. I know he's got like good intentions, blah, 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 blah. Number one, he steals all Harry's mail when Harry is alone, isolated most of his life, finally makes friends, goes back to his horrible Dursley's family's home. Now Dobby's just stealing his mail? Why? Why? He's like, oh, Harry Potter can't go back to the thing, he'll die. But dude, give the guy a break. Let him read a letter. So after that, then he throws his cake on Mr. Dursley's mom's head. So guess what? Harry goes to basically a prison now in the Dursley's house. They put bars on his windows. Thanks, Dobby. Then what happens? Dobby continues to, he charms a bludger to try to break Harry's arm during his Quidditch match. Stop trying to help. And I know there's a joke made about this within the book, that every time Dobby tries to help Harry Potter, he essentially almost kills him or makes his life progressively worse. But man, this guy is so annoying in this book. I know he's a sweet character. I know his sort of ultimate story really hits hard as the series progresses, spoiler alert. But he is unbelievably annoying in this book, and Rowling gets a heat check, Dobby gets a heat check. No good, not for me. It's an airball on you, Dobby. Okay, now we're gonna go what they call half blank internet research, which is we do a little bit light research where we look into the making of this book, some stories that didn't make the cut, some stories that may have not made the cut. So a couple of things about this and looking into it. First of all, it seems like there was a lot more background into Dean Thomas's story that was left on the cutting room floor here, because the editor of this book sort of said, you can either give Neville Longbottom the background or you can give Dean Thomas the background. Now, I think that was ultimately a smart choice because Dean Thomas comes out of this. Dean Thomas does get a little bit of background later on in the series, but not really much. Meanwhile, Neville becomes a really important player as the series progresses, especially as we get to the 7th book. He is essential to, spoiler alert, killing one of the Horcruxes. And I think that ultimately it was a wise decision that was made that way. Apparently as well, another thing that occurred in the writing of this book was a lot of things to do with the Horcruxes, a lot of elements of the story that ultimately would become Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince were moved from the story into the Half-Blood Prince years and years later. But a lot of the ideas, I guess, initially started in the conception of the Chamber of Secrets. Next up, Apex Mountain. This is the height of heights, whether it be for the writer, never got better than this, whether it be for a character, it never got better than this. In this case, it's a book series, so it could be that it's a character, and in my case, it is going to be a character. Whose Apex Mountain is this? A couple of options here. Gilderoy Lockhart. His career was sort of not great after this because he had a serious head injury due to his own thing. Could be, my pick, Ron Weasley. Ron Weasley is my Apex Mountain pick for this one because, very simply, it never gets better for him than this. Next book, he's sidelined for the climax. It's all Harry and Hermione as they sort of do the time spinner thing. Book 4, he's kind of annoying. He's in this sort of thing with Parvati, or he's not, or Lavender Brown, and he's not really hanging out and doing the stuff that Harry needs from him. He's kind of sort of on the outside looking in on a lot of the subsequent books. He's got these sort of on again, off again, fighting with his friends, teenager stuff. And in this book, he's essential to the final run. He essentially goes into the Chamber of Secrets, doesn't quite get all the way in with Harry. He does everything he can to get separated by the rocks. He helps Harry evade Gilderoy Lockhart. He goes on the quest to infiltrate Draco Malfoy and the Slytherin common room by posing as Crabbe and Goyle when they have the potion, the Animagus potion, I think, where Hermione turns into a cat so she can't come along. Ron's essential to this entire plot. Ron's essential to this entire story. And I don't think it gets any better for him throughout the rest of the series. In terms of being essential to the Harry Potter plot, I don't think it ever gets better for Ron. So this is his Apex Mountain. Next up, best hang, worst hang. This is for the character you most want to get a drink with, have a beer, and the worst character maybe to have a drink with. So my best hang here, a couple of options. I'm going to go Mr. Weasley. Guy seems very interested in human culture. I think we could chop it up a little bit. He's also got 6 kids at home. He's looking to sort of tie one on and get after it. So Mr. Weasley, I think, would be a fun hang. Maybe he was a wild man before Molly Weasley sort of tied him up and made him into a real sort of dad type. Worst hang, Moaning Myrtle. She is insufferable. Would never want to spend any time with her. All she does is talk about, how these gripes she had and why she's haunting like a girl she went to school with. I know she was murdered as a teenager. That's not very cool. That's not very cash money. I feel bad for her for that. But that doesn't mean I want to hang out. It doesn't mean that we got to just talk about nonstop how you were like murdered before your time and blah, 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 blah. Not a cool hang, Moaning Myrtle. And she's kind of whiny. Played by famously a 40-year-old woman in the movie. Very weird vibe. But even teenage Moaning Myrtle does not seem like somebody I want to grab a beer with. Maybe because she's also, I think, canonically 15 years old. So it'd be really weird if I was there with a child ghost. Not a very good look. Okay, this is an award of my own creation, and I'd like to come up with a few more of these as we go through this. But it is the Golden Compass Award for Better Than the Movie, where Golden Compass, a famously iconic youth, I guess it's kind of like a young adult novel or children's book, with a lot of big ideas, on religion, on institutions, famously made into a pretty good BBC HBO series a few years ago, but it was turned into a movie series with Daniel Craig and Nicole Kidman in the early aughts. That was an atrocious adaptation of the text. Bastardized a lot of what made the Golden Compass interesting, and the result was bad. So I always want to talk about whether the movie is actually better than the book, and I think very rarely will a truly rereadable book have a movie that is better than it, because a lot of times what adds to the text and adds to your ability to revisit the book itself is that there's no easier way to consume the story in a meaningful, good way. So certainly the movie, while I think it's very good, is not better than the text here. The movie, the second Harry Potter film, is very darn good in my opinion. It perfectly captures this vibe, this transition from just a purely children's book to a darker, more adult world. And it does so while still like maintaining sort of a childish charm to it. Very difficult line to cross. In a lot of ways, it feels like the last vestige of the true like children's element of the Harry Potter movies. The third movie moves in a different direction, different director, and it just has a different vibe to it. I still really enjoy all of these movies for the most part, but I think that in terms of adaptation wise, Chamber of Secrets might be the most committed to the book itself, and that's why it's one of the better adaptations in my opinion. So while the book is certainly better than the movie, this is pretty close. This is as close as maybe any of these books come in my opinion. Now we're going to wrap up with some unanswerable questions. First off, how did Fawkes the Phoenix know when to show up to give the sword to Harry? Because if the Phoenix shows up too early, he probably screws up the sort of meeting between Harry Potter and the Basilisk. And if he shows up too late, then Ginny and Harry are just dead. So what's going on with Fawkes? Like, how does he know how to do this in a timely fashion? This guy's got like a sixth sense. Like, what's his deal? I need to know how Fawkes predicted this. Can he predict sporting event outcomes? Is he like a big gambler? Is he like that book from the Back to the Future movies where Fawkes can just like see into the future? I don't know the rules of Fawkes. I know that he can die and come back, which is pretty darn useful skill, but can he also perfectly time like the future? Is he just an extremely lucky bird? He was just flying around that little chamber with that hat waiting for Harry to show up and drop it on his head at the exact right moment? How does it work? Also, he's very strong, because if you remember when this book series sort of like, or when this climax sort of wraps up, Fawkes flies Harry, Ron, and Gilderoy Lockhart out of the chamber, and it's very strange. Like, how is he so strong that he can both, I guess, struggle to lift this sort of hat and then also carry two children and an adult male out of the Chamber of Secrets? This bird leaves me with a lot of questions, and that's what I was left thinking about. Unanswerable. Can't answer these questions. Unanswerable question number 2. Why didn't Moaning Myrtle notice the basilisk sneaking through her bathroom every time it was going to freeze all these students and put them in this like frozen state? Why did Moaning Myrtle notice that? I know that she doesn't like really talk about the way she was killed. She says nobody's ever asked her about how she was killed before. But you don't think she would like notice a giant snake sneaking around, just freezing people? Okay, Myrtle, you continue to be the worst hang in the whole book. You probably could have stopped some kids getting frozen nearly to death and almost Hogwarts shutting down. Thanks, Myrtle. Thanks. Okay, final unanswerable question. Why, if Hagrid was banned from doing magic, expelled from Hogwarts, his wand got taken away because of what happened to Moaning Myrtle, because they thought that he had allowed some sort of spider thing to come in and kill her. Okay, whatever. But how come he doesn't get his wand back and doesn't get sort of like, I don't know, compensation of some kind after it comes out, after the events of this book, that it was Tom Riddle who did this, who framed him? Lord Voldemort, Tom Riddle. He framed Hagrid. He ruined his life, essentially. He got his wand taken away. He got him banned from Hogwarts. He was treated as a pariah. Obviously, Dumbledore took care of him, made him the groundskeeper at the school. But, like, nobody's going to be sorry about that. Sorry we ruined your life, Hagrid. I mean, justice for Hagrid here. It's not right. It's not right what happens if he gets railroaded, and then everyone's like, no, it's a happy ending. Not for Hagrid. He still lives in a shack and can't use magic. Okay, so final decision, final thoughts on this book. Where does it land on my rereadability score? I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10 on the rereadability score. Pretty darn good. There's a lot to unpack here. The world itself is so rich. You can experience it a lot of different ways. I know that Audible just released this sort of full cast audio production of this. The audiobook itself is amazing. The book itself is amazing. I've experienced it a bunch of different ways, and it's just as enjoyable every single time. It's also like a quick experience, a quick read if you do want to reread it. So that gives it a couple bonus points, and that jumps it up a little bit higher. I'm going to be talking about another one of these videos, some longer books, and it's tough. It's tough to reread a longer book. I'll put it that way. So that has been the first video in our series on the ReReadables. Thank you to the Ringer and Bill Simmons for giving me the idea for all of this. They are the best, the goats. And let me know what else you guys want me to talk about on this channel in terms of rereadable books. What's your most rereadable book? Do you agree with these categories? What would you give out category-wise? What scenes? What is your favorite quote from the book? I want to hear from you guys. Let me know.